SicEm365 Radio. David Helman with us Tuesdays on SicEm365 from DallasCowboys.com. David, what positions, in your opinion, are the ones that are the most competitive as far as still looking for a starter on either side of the football?
The obvious one's got to be linebacker, just because there's so much talent and resource invested in that. I feel like we've talked about that plenty. Defensive tackle is another one. I think a lot of names to know, but not a lot of sure things. And then I would throw safety in as well. I think those are probably, I basically just named like 70% of the defense, but I think that's a testament to how few certainties there are on that side of the ball.
Why have I seen a bunch of articles about Tyler Biadasz? Did he perform that well in minicamp that he is on the up?
If you want my cynical sports writer answer, it's probably just, mainly because they made him available. And, they made him available, and he's a rising player. He was an exciting draft pick last year. Got a chance to play as a rookie. But honestly, that is a really interesting spot in the sense that, I wouldn't call Tyler Biadasz a proven commodity, but the Cowboys certainly don't seem to have put a lot in the way of competition at that roster spot. He's the only true center on the roster, and anybody that you would consider his competition, Connor McGovern, maybe Connor Williams, those guys have never played center in the NFL. They did it in college, but it's not something that they're used to doing in the NFL. So, you never, people love to say like no job is handed out, but it doesn't look like Tyler Biadasz has a lot of competition for that job right now. So, I think people are probably zeroing in on him being the starting center for the season.
David, I think they're burying the lead here. The Cowboys are going back to California officially. How do you feel about that?
Get me the hell out of here. That's how I feel about it. Look, we all love Texas, but oh my God, it's not even officially summer yet, and it's 95 and feels like 102 or whatever. So, it'll be, it's great for the team. They get to practice in 75-degree weather, and I get to watch them do it. So selfishly, I'm very excited about it.
Yeah, it's crazy. It seems like, things that we sometimes take for granted. We learned a lot of those things that we shouldn't in the last year or so. But, man, I can't wait. I don't know what the access is going to be like. Of course, you, a part of DallasCowboys.com, is going to be just fine in the end. We've asked you this before on the backup quarterback, and it's too much because too much is paid attention to that. But do you feel comfortable with where they are with the depth chart at quarterback behind Dak?
No, not really, to be honest with you. And that's kind of been my answer for a while is I don't feel great about it. I think Garrett Gilbert has made one NFL start, I believe, or it's very few if it's more than that. And, obviously the big one was last year. And then Ben DiNucci and throw in Cooper Rush. You're talking about three guys that have done next to nothing in the starting lineup in the NFL. So I don't feel comfortable, but the counter argument to that is, what are you going to do at this point? Nick Mullins just got signed by Philly. That was another of the very few names left that have significant starting experience. Obviously, Blake Bortles got signed by Green Bay a month or so ago. So I'm not going to go as far as to say I feel comfortable. I just don't think there's really a whole lot of better options. So unless somebody comes available as we go through training camp, maybe a veteran gets cut or something, I think you're kind of stuck with this.
Nahshon Wright's been kind of the story of the mini camps, and he was, kind of a surprise pick because a lot of people didn't have him rated very high. What do Cowboys fans need to know about him as they head into real camp in a month?
Good question. What do they need to know? I guess what I would say they need to know is, for a guy, a surprise pick, like you said, kind of came out of nowhere. He's basically 6'4". He's all arms and legs. The guy is unbelievably long, but I think he moves a lot more naturally and a lot more gracefully than you would probably expect of a guy with that size. Like, that's the problem when you're that big, is that it's hard to change direction in the open field. But he looked really smooth and really natural doing it at OTAs. Now, I'm already nervous. That we're penciling this guy into the starting lineup. He looked really impressive in a handful of unpadded practices. But again, he's lower on the depth chart. He's going against, he's not going against Dak in most of his reps. He's not going against, the Michael Gallups and CeeDee Lambs of the world. Amari Cooper didn't even practice during the spring. So I'm already nervous, and it's not a slight on Nashawn Wright, but I'm already nervous that we're maybe putting too much on this guy. I am intrigued to see what he looks like, but I just, like I said, there's a lot of hype, and I think it's mainly because, he was such a surprise pick. I think people were really pleasantly surprised by how good he looked at OTAs, and that's great, but there's a lot more I want to see before I'm talking about him as a starter.
David, how does Ben McAdoo go about, being in his analyst kind of evaluator type role? Like, what were his responsibilities, or what kind of input does he provide in the role that they've given to him?
Typically, just as a general statement, like those analyst roles, typically guys that do projects like long-term projects, looking at your personnel groupings, like how do we respond when we're in this down and distance this personnel? How do other teams respond to us? How can we self-scout, advanced scouting? Every team in the league has a handful of guys that work on the next 3 or 4 opponents, their tendencies, what they do. That's just a general statement. But I do love, whenever a team hires a guy into a role like this, they're always very vague about it, as if, there's some secret sauce that he's working on that's going to really give them a leg up. And maybe it is. It just seems kind of silly. And I feel like it's not just a Cowboy thing. I think every team in the league does that. They don't like to give away what those guys work on. So, very specifically, I have no idea what Ben McAdoo's doing, but I do know, he's got a 20-plus year relationship with Mike McCarthy, and if that makes Mike McCarthy feel more comfortable scouting his own team and his future opponents, more power to him.
Do you expect Kelvin Joseph to start?
This is my hot take, and I'm ready. I feel like it's going to offend some people. No, I don't think he will, and that's not because he had COVID-19 during minicamp. He didn't practice as much as some other guys. It's not necessarily because of that. I'm not writing him off because of OTAs. But I just think people undervalue starting experience in the NFL, and Jordan Lewis has 4 years of starting experience. Anthony Brown has 5. They just drafted Trayvon Diggs, who, granted, did start as a rookie, but that's another year of experience that he has on Kelvin Joseph. And if I had to bet, Kelvin Joseph will probably start some games at some point during the season for one reason or another. But I'm going to go out on a limb and say if everybody's healthy, he won't be starting when they play Tampa. That's just a guess on my part.
David Helman with us, DallasCowboys.com on SicEm365 Radio. So let's look at some roster management. They have the draft. They've had their free agency. There's going to be guys that maybe there's a handful that come and go. There won't be anything that's alarming or a major shakeup, any roster changes between now and camp, will there?
I don't think anything that you would qualify as major, but it's very normal to see teams add or subtract as you go through the summer. They already did it on a very minor scale with a couple of receivers, just bottom of the depth chart guys. And I said this on another radio interview recently. Again, I don't want to start a hype train of my own. I have nothing to back me up. But going back to the center thing, I just wonder. You look at spots on the roster where you're like, where can we add competition? Where can we add somebody? And again, when you think about the fact that Tyler Biadasz is the only true center that is employed by this team, I just think that's interesting. It doesn't jive with what they usually do, which is try to, create a competition at as many spots as possible. So it just makes me wonder, will a experienced center wind up on the roster by the time by the time we're ready to get on the plane to go to California? Again, that is not a report. I haven't heard anything. It's just me speculating. Maybe that wouldn't surprise me.
When you look at the NFC East, Washington won the division, and some can say with default, but they did have a defense that was dominating most of the year and found a way no matter how bad it was around them. When you look at New York, Philadelphia, Washington, and Dallas, have you dug in deep enough on who maybe helped themselves the most?
I try to keep my finger on the pulse of what everybody's doing. I think the Giants probably don't get enough credit for how much they've improved their roster just as a whole, in my opinion. I think, their line's not amazing, but they've upgraded it from when it was terrible a few years ago. Obviously, their receiver core suddenly looks like a strength after being a weakness for so long. I mean, they already had Sterling Shepard, signed Kenny Galladay, drafted Kadarius Toney, and you obviously get Saquon Barkley back from an injury, and if he's fully healthy, he's one of the 3 or 4 best backs in the league. The thing for me, and that's kind of, it all boils down to quarterback play for me, though. Like, the Washington might have the best top to bottom roster in the division when you look at all their defensive talent. And again, they've upgraded their offense a lot as well. But which quarterback are you taking among these 4? Like, I can't think of a sane person on planet Earth that would take anybody above Dak Prescott. Ryan Fitzpatrick's probably going to play some great games for them. He's probably going to play a handful of stinkers too. Daniel Jones, completely do not trust his ball security or his ability to make things click. Haven't seen it yet. And Jalen Hurts is a little bit of an unknown, but having gotten a chance to watch him go against a bad Dallas team last year, I certainly wasn't impressed. So I know it's not as simple as just the quarterback, but when in doubt, I lean towards the quarterback, and I think Dallas far and away has the edge in that department.
As spectacular as CeeDee Lamb was at times, especially as a rookie, he did have some drops, and some of them in key moments. Was that just inexperience, or was that focus, or what was that in your opinion?
Yeah, focus is probably fair. Just down focus. And you're right. Yeah, I mean, he had a handful of really bad miscues. Like the Pittsburgh game comes to mind. He had another one that I completely forgot about. I'm drawing a blank on which game it was, but dropped the touchdown pass that could have swung. I think maybe it was Baltimore. But yeah, no, he had some very big miscues. But I chalked that up to focus. I chalked that up to, like, I don't worry about him in the long term, just based on, some of the things that he was able to do last year, what we know of his college tape, the way he's transitioned it over into this offseason. He's doing all the same stuff he was doing last year. He looks bigger. He looks stronger. He had some disappointing moments last year, but until I'm not worried about it until he gives me more reason that I need to see. I think he's going to be just fine.
David, on the offensive line, Zach Martin was still good, but obviously he had his ups and downs and some injuries that kind of affected him. We know Lyle Collins and Tyron Smith basically zero because of how it all went down. Of those 3, is it automatic that Tyron Smith's the one that has to be the best of the bounce back years among those 3?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I don't know if Tyron just has to be available, I guess, because like if he's healthy and playing, I have no concerns about him whatsoever. I think he's going to be, among the 8 or 10 best left tackles in the league. For me, and honestly, the same thing goes for Zach Martin. I think if you're talking about the best, the absolute best, then I think it's probably Lyle Collins, because the other 2 have a chance to go to the Hall of Fame. And Lyle was playing really, really well before last year, but he's not quite on that level. He's never been named All-Pro. He's never been to a Pro Bowl. I think he's only started 2 seasons in the league at right tackle, which is kind of weird to think about because he's been in the NFL for so long, or at right tackle, excuse me. But if he elevates his game and plays the way that I think he can, I really think, before he got hurt last year, I would argue he might have been the most underrated player on this entire roster. And if he can regain that form to go ahead with 2 guys that we already know can play at the very top level of football, then I think now you have a chance where you're talking about this being one of the better lines in football again, which obviously hasn't been the case the last 2 or so years.
Your thoughts on, and last question, thanks for your time, David Helman, DallasCowboys.com, on Paul Mainieri and the fact that he's done at LSU. And they made a little run that not many people expected, but obviously you even told us last week that Tennessee was going to be a handful.
Yeah, I was proud of them. They were a flawed team, and it showed when they finally went up against, one of the best teams in the country. But I was proud that they made a run and put some postseason magic together for Paul. They won 4 straight games to get out of their regional. I can't, if you can't tell, I'm a very jaded and cynical person, and covering sports as closely as I do definitely doesn't help in a lot of cases. But Paul Mainieri, he's one of the really good people that I've ever had the pleasure to cover. Even I covered him when I was 19, just getting started, trying to do this as a career. And he used to take the time to, like, whether you were the newspaper beat writer that's been there for 30 years or the 19-year-old idiot who just got there, he took the time to be thoughtful and nice and courteous. And, he treated me the same way that he would treat somebody 3 times my age. And I thought that was always really cool. I learned a lot about just how to do this job from him, and also obviously a lot about baseball. So, wonderful guy. Wish him the best in retirement, and I'll be excited to see who LSU puts in his place.
Thank you very much. That's David Helman every Tuesday at 5 o'clock on SicEm365 Radio. Thank you for those who like the